Do your choices matter? Is it a man's words that make him, or his actions? Today, we're going to tell a tale, many tales, actually, as we take a look at the Fable series. Fable is a series of action RPG games made in the 2000s that put choice at the forefront. The goal of the game was to give players customization, freedom, and the ability to influence environments, people, and the game itself. The game came at a time when branching storylines, multiple endings, and morality weren't as prevalent as they are today. It was one of the pioneers of this style of RPG, not discounting things like The Elder Scrolls or Deus Ex. But what Fable did do first was bring this type of choice to the masses. It made people realize that this was an option, and something like this could be made. It surrounded the entire game in this premise of morality and choice. It wasn't just a feature, it was the whole thing. This idea has been around for quite some time, probably originating in Japanese visual novels in the 80s and 90s. Now we have entire games based around this concept of narrative choice, but Fable was one of the progenitors of putting this at the forefront. It also told its own original story, created a unique atmosphere, and presented interesting combat. In this series, I'm going to be delving into all of the Fable games, figuring out how they work and what makes them so special. In this video, though, we're going to focus on the first game in the series. I know you're probably wondering why I'm talking about one game in this video, not the entire series, but I wanted to experiment with the format. In the end, you're going to get the same result, a very long retrospective with all of the individual chapters in it. The final video will also have a ton of extra content that weren't in the individual chapters. The first video, and the part that you're watching now, will cover Fable. The second part will cover Fable 2, the third will cover Fable 3, and the final retrospective will have an extra section which will cover Fable The Journey, Fable Fortune, the cancelled Fable Legends, the upcoming Fable 4, and many, many novels. I also want to note here really quickly that these games are heavily based on morality, so the choices that you make determine what type of experience you're going to have. Because these experiences can be so drastically different, I decided to do two main playthroughs, a good and an evil one, and cover both of them in each video. Generally, I went with covering my good playthrough first and covering my evil playthrough second. I tried to do this in a way that would be comprehensive, but not retread old ground. Obligatory spoiler warning for Fable, Fable The Lost Chapters, and Fable Anniversary. Hi Dad, it's me, your favorite son, and today I want to talk about Fable. Fable began development in the year 2000 by Big Blue Box, which was a satellite studio of Lionhead. Lionhead was founded by Peter Molyneux, who had a big hand in Fable. This was Big Blue Box's first project as a studio, and they weren't interested in producing a generic title. They wanted to make something unique and wanted to give players diversified experiences. They specifically wanted to create a role-playing game that no one had seen before.
Normally, in a role-playing game, you play the role of some character, but in Fable, you play yourself within the world.
This was the thesis of Fable, to allow players to do what they wanted, and this was to be reflected in the character itself. The world was also supposed to react to the way the player acted, creating a realistic environment for the player to inhabit. The game's setting was based on medieval Europe, and the team went out and looked at natural scenes and environments for inspiration. They wanted the game to feel like a classic fantasy with tinges of dark. The team described the world as being a labor of love, putting a large amount of detail into the environments and wanting the surroundings to be as much a part of the experience as the combat was. The team crafted over 5,000 animations for the game, wanting each to have its purpose and place. This was just another way of delivering a world that reacted to the character, and a character that interacted with the world. Danny Elfman was involved in the soundtrack for the game, being interested in the project, and wrote the theme for Fable. The composers wanted the soundtrack to have multiple styles, both fantasy and dark, but also trying to have a motif that connected the tracks. If there's one thing that I can say, looking back on the team's statements and their ideas for the game, they were all in sync. It's clear that the entire team was on the same page as to what the point of Fable was, and I think that this is crucial in making a game work. Most of Fable's success can be attributed to this. The vision was clear, and everyone working on it knew what goal they were trying to further. Fable was released on Xbox September 14th, 2004. Fable would also get a re-release and expansion called Fable: The Lost Chapters, which added some quests and DLC, and would be released on PC the next year. Fable: The Lost Chapters would also get a re-release as the Anniversary Edition, which graphically overhauled the game and changed the combat, releasing in February of 2014. For this review, I'll mostly be playing Fable Anniversary, as it's the most accessible, easy to use, and up-to-date version. I'll show some comparisons here and there and illustrate the differences between the first two versions when necessary. The largest thing that this version of the game does is overhaul the graphics. It makes Fable look more up-to-date than even the third game in the series. It looks fantastic and makes it a little more pleasing to experience than the original. The Anniversary Edition also boasted an easy-to-use new interface, which I have some gripes with, but we'll get there. They included a new save system that allowed the player to save anytime and making the UI operate like a book. They also included achievements for the first time, with even some help from the fans, which I thought was a nice touch. The game begins with a narrator showing us a mural. This acts as the framing device for the entire game, the narrator describing the events of the game through these stained glass murals. We're introduced to the setting, Albion. Albion is mostly a green land, rich with agriculture. Farms and small towns dot the continent. To the south is the Darkwood, where dangerous Balverines prowl. And to the north is the place where cities like Bowerstone and the Heroes Guild call home. A few islands dot the coast of Albion, Witchwood being one of them, a dark place that's mostly uninhabited outside of a small city called Knothole Glade. Another island, Hook Coast, is covered in mountains and snow, but our story begins in Oakvale, a small city at the southern end of Albion. This prologue introduces us to our main character, unnamed for now as the Boy. It doesn't just introduce us to the character and the setting, but also the premise of the game. The Boy dreams of greatness, sometimes as a noble knight and other times as an evil warrior. This duality shows us that we choose our destiny in this game, and we'll be making some big choices here soon. We wake up, our father chastising us for daydreaming. It's our sister's birthday, and we have to get her a present. Our father will give us a couple gold coins if we do some good deeds around town. There are multiple things we can do around town. I chose to snitch on a cheating man, return a little girl's doll, defend a boy from a bully, and protect a man's crates. A good day of helping Oakvale. In the process, though, I accidentally hit a child younger than me. This caused me to be chastised by one of the guards. His words rang through my head.
If you were older, you'd be apprehended and fined by the town guards. You need to decide if behaving like that is worth it, my young friend.
You need to decide if behaving like that is worth it. It wasn't. It only got in the way. Doing good or bad deeds in Fable earns you alignment points. This either takes your alignment more toward good or evil. The alignment system in the first game is pretty elementary and would be expanded upon greatly in the later two games. The Anniversary Edition has 3 scales that represent your character. Alignment, which is not only affected by your deeds, but also your appearance and the spells that you use. Renown, which is increased by interacting with people, showing off trophies, and doing heroic deeds. And Attractiveness, which is affected solely by your appearance. The higher your renown, the more known you are across Albion as a hero. More people will recognize you, and you'll also have access to more expressions, actions that can be used to interact with others. Your alignment will control your physical experience and what spells you're able to master. Having fully good alignment will see you with a halo hovering over your head, and having fully evil alignment will seeing you have red eyes and glowing veins with gray skin. The more attractive you are, the more people will be willing to talk to you or even marry you. The more scary you look, the more people will scream and run away when they see you. My character wanted to be a hero, though. He dreamed of it, and this cemented that in his mind. He scrounged together enough money to buy some chocolates for his sister. Exactly enough money. 3 gold. I bought the chocolates and took them to Teresa, but as we left, tragedy struck. Bandits arrived in the town, stealing Teresa and the boy's mother.
The father fought to protect his kin, but he was no warrior, and fell mortally wounded. The bandits ripped the house apart, but could not find the boy. Through torture and threats, his mother and sister remained silent, and their furious attackers took them both.
Killing his father in the process. At this moment, Maze arrives, a powerful mage with glowing blue veins, pulling the boy away from his father's body. Maze saved him and offered him a place at the Heroes Guild. His life had been ripped away from him, but Maze represented power. The power to be able to protect the ones he loved. The power to save everyone.
I thought you'd have a stronger stomach than that. Come on. Save your energy, boy. It's not me you want to fight. You might not realize it, but I just saved your life. There's nothing left for you in Oakvale, and if you'd stayed, you'd be as dead as the rest of them. Come with me.
The boy accepted and met the guildmaster, the one who would be responsible for his training. He gets a dorm of his own that he shares with another student. After the guildmaster leaves, he cries. Waking up the next morning, we're introduced to Whisper, our dorm partner. We race to meet the guildmaster and begin our training. There's a large training arc here introducing the mechanics and aging the character forward a few years. The guildmaster trains us in the way of sword, archery, and will, which is the magic of the Fable world. This whole chapter of the game is pretty long, which at first I found annoying, but I realized that it's quite central to the narrative. Over the course of a couple hours, we naturally learn how to find side quests and complete quests on our own. We're also getting comfortable with the controls and systems. It's a good way to slowly deliver multiple systems to the player without throwing them in our lap all at once. It also serves to gently familiarize you with the world and the characters, making you grow closer to them. It's the best way to let the player identify with a character who's being trained in a hero school without just skipping over the whole thing. We train with the guildmaster and fight Whisper as our final test. We win, of course, and Thunder, a legendary hero, watches over our practice, revealing himself to be Whisper's brother. The combat systems in Fable are pretty simple, and we'll get in depth into them later, but for now I just want to give you a brief synopsis. In Fable, you have 3 types of fighting: melee, ranged, and will. Melee is simple. Swing your sword and hit the enemy. You can lock on or freely attack like most everything else. After you get a small combo going, you can use the right mouse button to activate a flourish move. This does more damage and normally knocks the enemy down or breaks through their block. You can also block with your weapon by holding the middle mouse button or roll out of the way by clicking the middle mouse button. Archery is pretty simplistic, using the same lock-on system and letting you control the power of your shot by holding the left mouse button longer. You can also right-click to go into a manual aim mode. Will is by far the most expansive of the combat systems because it also can affect the other systems. You hold shift to bring up a secondary menu of spells and can cycle through them. There are a ton of spells in this game which we'll get into, but you start off with only lightning, which will do light damage to enemies repeatedly. All 3 of these combat systems are pretty basic, but that doesn't mean that Fable doesn't have interesting combat. There are a ton of options for you to build your character around and a lot of different ways to go with it. It's really up to you to decide which of the three you want to specialize in, and this decision is made really by just using that system more. The only problem with this is that all of the systems don't feel equal. We'll see in a bit that melee and ranged can definitely be used on their own. They're self-sufficient. Level them up enough and you'll be slashing through enemies and bosses like it's nothing. But will doesn't really have the same luxury. It definitely feels weaker than the others, and I mostly used it to complement them rather than act as its own source of damage. Before we get to our tests, the Guildmaster asks us if we'd like to continue with training, and the story advances a bit, aging us up what looks like a few years. After training with the Guildmaster in these three disciplines, we take graded tests for each of them, and being exceptional grants us some great early game weapons. Before we graduate, we go with Whisper to spend some time in the woods. There she spots some bandits, and the two of us take them out. Fledgling heroes ready to deliver justice upon the world. Before we can graduate, Maze gives us our final test, having us attack him with each of our combat abilities.
Yes, quite impressive for a novice.
Maze tells us that our abilities were impressive for a novice. The powerful mage that saved us from the bandits, giving me his seal of approval, was all the motivation that I needed. I would be like him one day. Whisper and I graduate together, receiving our guild seals and the ability to take on quests for ourselves. The Guildmaster tells us that our choices, good or evil, will change the fate of Albion forever.
Multitude of thousands, or strike fear into their hearts. These are dark times. The shadows of Albion are stirring, and strange winds are blowing. Your choices, whether they lead you down the path of good or evil, will change the face of the world.
He echoes the words of the guard from Oakvale. At this point, we're introduced to the quest system, which is surprisingly robust. You can take on new quests from the map table in the Heroes Guild. These can be main quests, which are gold, side quests, which are silver, or bronze quests, which are the same as silver, except they are obtained from people and not the Heroes Guild. Whenever a quest is received, you may take boasts with it. Boasts are an incredibly interesting system that I've never really seen in another game, at least not like this. These allow you to stand outside the Heroes Guild and brag about your future heroism. This will see you accepting additional challenges by wagering gold, and if the challenges are completed, you receive additional renown and gold. If the challenges are not completed, the gold is lost. These boasts can be anything from doing the quest with no armor to not taking any damage. This really incentivizes the player to focus more on combat and be more engaged in the quest itself. It also encourages replayability in the game itself, knowing that there are more challenges to be undertaken. It's inherently a risk-reward system where your reputation in Albion is on the line. I take my first quest and head out. Wasps are attacking the picnic area outside of the Heroes Guild. I slay them and defeat my first boss, the Wasp Queen. With the gold from this quest, it's finally time to choose a title. This is how the NPCs in the game will refer to us throughout our playthrough. Normally, you can change your title whenever you feel like. You can gain new titles throughout the game from completing certain quests, huge feats, or just buying them. I decided to pick one title for each of my characters and use that to refer to them throughout the video. I chose Saber, because I felt like this most represented the journey that I wanted this character to go on. A sword in the darkness, a protector, a peacekeeper. We also gained some experience, and it was time to level up. The experience system for Fable is an incredible high point for me, and I feel like it does what it's trying to do very well. It's pretty simple. We have 3 specialized types of XP: strength, skill, and will. The 4th type of experience is general. You gain general XP from doing most things, completing quests, killing enemies, all that. You gain specialized XP from attacking with those specialties. For example, if you attack an enemy with your bow, you'll gain skill XP. If you attack an enemy with your sword, you'll gain strength XP. I always love seeing these types of systems in games because you're leveling up your skill by using them. This means that for the most part, you can't become a badass mage just by using swords. You can't funnel all your experience that you gain from combat and never use a spell. Now, there's a caveat to this. When you level up, you spend this experience to buy or upgrade abilities and stats. If you're upgrading a strength skill, you'll use your strength experience to buy this upgrade, until your strength experience runs out. Then the overflow will be charged to the general experience. If you have no strength experience, you can just use general experience to buy an ability. So this is kind of the best of both worlds system. You're rewarded for using the type of combat you want to upgrade, but you can also use your general experience for other systems if you please. I really like this system, and I think it finds a balance between the mechanics of things like the Elder Scrolls, where your attributes are only leveled by using them, and things like Mass Effect, where you can just get skill upgrades and spend them whatever way you please. Okay, maybe that wasn't as simple as I thought, but still a well-rounded and thought-out system. It also ties into the thesis of the game, which is your character reflecting your actions. The only thing I don't like about the XP system is the way you gather general XP. Specialized XP like Strength, for example, is automatically given to you. General XP appears as green orbs on the ground after you kill an enemy, which you have to pick up. This can be done easily by holding down Shift, which will pull all of the orbs towards you, but this seemed unnecessary and kind of an annoyance after every battle. If we're already being given the specialized XP automatically, why not extend that to general XP? When you get back to the guild, you meet Briar Rose, another famous hero. She's a little cocky, but tells us she's going to Knothole Glade.
Oh, hello. You must be the kid Maze is always talking about. Can't imagine what he sees in you. Still, I suppose Maze knows best.
The guildmaster informs me that Maze is looking for me, so I head to Bowerstone, Albion's capital. Each city has a few different shops, blacksmiths, tailors, general stores, and barbers. These work mostly the same as other RPGs, letting you buy or sell items, but Fable actively encourages you to use the game's economy to your advantage. Multiple tips in the game will tell you to buy items from one store and sell them to another for a higher price. I never really did this, but I thought it was cool to see the game recognizing this as a valid way of making money. The system's also kind of broken, so it was a little cheese for me. Maze tells Saber that there may have been another survivor of the Oakvale massacre, his sister. Teresa could be alive. Suddenly, the quest for revenge and Saber's development has become about something else, getting his old life back. Saber took a quest to protect Orchard Farm from bandits, helping the good folk of the farm to protect their goods. There's another quest that can be accepted here, the opposite one, to attack Orchard Farm. Why would someone want to attack Orchard Farm? What kind of life is that, helping bandits? When Saber arrives, Whisper is there to greet him, telling him that she might accept the quest to attack the farm. This worried me. What could Whisper be becoming? Is the hero's journey already corrupting her? I wasn't sure. All I knew was Orchard Farm needed a hero, even a fledgling one like myself. I protected the farm against bandits, and Whisper arrived at the end to fight me. She lost, as I expected. I accepted another quest to lead some traders through the Darkwood. This area is a shadowy place full of swamps, balverines, Wolverine-like creatures, and a temple boasting power for ones evil enough to worship a dark god. As Saber makes his way through the Darkwood, he comes across a trader, bitten by a balverine and asking for help. We're met with a choice, to leave this trader and potentially spare ourselves having to deal with another balverine, or take the chance. I thought the chance was worth it. The alternative was to ensure his death in these woods. At least this way there was a possibility of his life being spared. Unfortunately, shortly after this he would turn, and Saber would be forced to slay the man. In this moment, I realized that you couldn't save everyone. Just before exiting the Darkwood, the trader village of Barrow Fields on the other side, a golem appeared. This is one of many boss battles in Fable. We have to dodge around the golem's showers of thrown rocks and attack him at distinct moments. Most of the bosses are pretty simple, one or two prevalent mechanics. I wish that they had a little more depth to the fights. There's a few standout ones that we'll talk about later, but most of them are pretty plain. Arriving at Barrow Fields, the traders safely in tow, we're contacted again by Maze. This time he's asking us to meet him in Oakvale, Saber's hometown. When Saber arrives in Oakvale, he's confronted by a woman that he doesn't remember, until the thoughts come flooding back.
So where have you been all this time? You do remember me, don't you? I was looking for Rosie, my teddy bear, just before the raid. After that day, my parents moved to Bowerstone, but I never really liked it there. Are you all right? I think I lost you there for a second. Anyway, I have to go now, but it was great to see you again.
He's pulled out and Maze is waiting for him. Maze has a new tip on Saber's sister, a blind seeress who is the right hand to Twinblade. He says she might know something about the survivors of Oakvale. Twinblade used to be a hero but had no patience for the guild. He brought together 12 different clans of bandits, uniting them under one banner, sharing his name. Maze also tells us that he suspects Twinblade was behind the attack on Oakvale. In Oakvale, we find a woman lamenting her husband who's lost at sea. Journeying to the other side of town, we'll come across an entrepreneur who wants to get rid of a ghost from his property. The ghost happens to be the husband of the waiting woman and wants us to return his treasure to her. I found it on the shores of Oakvale and returned it to the woman. The ghost tells us where his stash is hidden in the cemetery and moves on. Digging up this stash nets us a new great axe and a silver key. A lot of the secrets in Fable are locked behind silver keys. These can mostly be found by digging them out of the ground or fishing them out of the water. These silver keys unlock chests hidden around the world and usually hold great weapons, armor, or potions. Since the entrepreneur has his property back, he starts up his business again, a game of chicken punting. This game sees you kicking chickens and trying to hit specific spots on a dock. Chicken kicking is a staple of the Fable series and would become a recurring element in some form or another. Saber heads to the Twinblade camp and, oh boy, this quest. I forgot about this until I was going back through footage and, man, this is a little rough. So, Fable, as much as I've spoken highly about it, is a little janky. It's originally an Xbox PC game released in the early 2000s, so that's a bit expected. Also, I want to give credit because this is a game with many different storylines and tons of different outcomes to your experience. I can imagine that whenever coding a project like this, things get complicated, especially with so many systems involved. This quest sees 3 bandits coming out from the camp to patrol the area. We have to sneak by them and get into the bandit camp. If they see us, though, they'll alert the guards and close the door to the camp. If this happens, a timer is set, forcing us to wait for the next set of bandits to come out, and thus giving us another try to sneak past them. This quest is a little ridiculous, and it's not impossible to do it without exploiting the AI a little bit, but it's not easy. These AI can seemingly notice you from incredibly far distances and just try to find you even when you're out of sight. Your sneak also doesn't move very fast, so getting away from them while moving in the shadows is almost impossible. All of you are probably saying, "Son, your guile skill isn't high enough." Guile is an ability that increases how well you sneak, steal, and trade, but this main quest shouldn't be dependent on an ability that you have to have leveled up this early in the game. I had to actually look up a video on how other people did this quest to get it to work, but I have no idea how I would have done this naturally. Also, this is the only time in the main quest that you're forced to sneak, so it just seemed like a weird instance of pushing a barely used mechanic. Saber sneaks past the bandits and arrives at the gate to the bandit camp. Saber had to pretend to be a bandit to get into the camp, wearing their attire. This was something he was vehemently against. You see, for this playthrough, I tried to wear exclusively armor that was attractive and brought my alignment up, not down. The bandit gear made me appear scary and, frankly, like a ruffian. But a hero has to do what a hero has to do. So I donned the bandit attire and entered the camp. There we had to get into Twinblade's tent, and there was multiple ways to go about this. Some assassins were offering me their services for 2,000 gold, but I wasn't exactly sure how moral that was. I always had the option of killing every bandit in the camp and entering that way, but it was a bit loud for my tastes. There was also the matter of the captives. There's 2 women caged in the back of the camp and ready for the bandits. If I freed them, the bandits would surely open the gates to try and retrieve them. It's risky, as I'm wagering the lives of 2 women on a chance that they get away, but it's well worth it. This got me into Twinblade's tent, and he was ready for me. Twinblade is a tower of a man, a hulking, massive brute, and he fights like one, swinging blades wantonly and often getting them stuck in the ground. This is when the time to strike is right. The only annoying thing about this fight is the circle of bandits around the arena. If you get too close to them, they start hitting you with their swords. Most of the fight is just repeating the same loop. Avoid Twinblade, wait for him to stick his swords in the ground, hit him a couple times, repeat. This boss was fine on my good playthrough, but if you're not as powerful as I was yet, this fight drags out for quite a while. Twinblade goes down, and just as we're about to give him the mercy of death, the seeress shows herself.
There you are. What's wrong? Don't you recognize your own sister?
She turns out to be Saber's sister, Teresa. The girl is blind, her eyes sliced out by the leader of the Raiders of Oakvale. She crawled through the forest, found eventually by Twinblade and serving in his clan. He took her by his side, accepting her prophetic whispers as truth. She spins one of these truths, telling Saber that he'll have to make a choice one day between the darkness and the light. In Fable, there's something that's just off with the line delivery. A lot of times when NPCs are speaking, they almost start the next line way too fast.
I've seen so many things. So much killing. So much dying. I've seen you, little brother. In a ring of sand and blood. An arena full of secrets.
I'm not sure if this had to do with syncing up to the already quick animations in the game, but it really feels disjointed and wooden sometimes. This is on full display with Teresa in this scene. This wasn't the case with every single character in the game, and a lot of characters actually have great performances, like the Guildmaster.
Now, take your guild seals and venture forth as heroes.
But when it did happen, it served to take me out of the game and lessened the emotional impact of a scene. Teresa unlocks a power in Saber that runs in their bloodline, and Twinblade asks for death. I choose to spare his life. He was not the one responsible for Oakvale, that much is clear, and he raised my sister as his own. Maze requested my presence to talk to me about my sister, but I had a quest to attend to. A woman lost her grandson, saying that he journeyed into a hob cave. Hobs are interesting enemies, and just one of the various monsters that grace Albion. Each creature has a pretty deep and substantial lore when you take a look at them. The Balverines were created out of a larger, more ferocious creature called Balvorns. These massive beasts would feed on thousands at a time. Only one man survived the slaughter that they would rack upon the world, and he became the first Balverine. I actually read an entire book about this subject, written by Peter David, called Fable, the Balverine Order. It was not very good. We'll get heavier into the external materials like this in the final part of this retrospective, though. Trolls were one of the first creatures to wander the lands of Albion, and were mostly hunted extinct by the Old Kingdom. The Hobbs have their own tragic backstory. Supposedly the first Hobbs were created by nymphs, by kidnapping wandering children and transforming them into these beasts. There's a lot of lore in Fable, a surprising amount actually for this game. But don't worry, we have a history lesson coming soon that will bring you entirely up to speed. I descended into the Hob Cave looking for the boy. In my pursuit, I found hundreds of Hobs constantly swarming around me. I also found a man who was raiding the cave and got caught, his party members killed. I took pity on him and helped him, allowing him to join me on my quest. When I finally found the boy at the bottom of the cavern, he was being kidnapped by a nymph who needed a human sacrifice for her ritual. She told me I could take the boy as long as I gave her another human. I wasn't sure what to do in this situation. I could have surely killed the nymph and rescued the boy, but I wasn't sure how strong nymphs were. I hadn't fought one yet. The man I had with me was a bandit. He was stealing from this place, here to thieve and sell everything he found. An innocent child had to be worth more than that, right? Plus, I agreed. I had a quest to complete. I traded his life for the boys and left. I couldn't look back because the decision had been made. There was no use pondering it now. This was a tough decision Fable presented me because I wasn't really sure what the right choice was here. I guess it only matters that I thought it was right. But was it? I returned the boy to his grandmother and he promptly left her home, saying that she wasn't suitable to live with. Maze tells me that there's a rumor an old friend of his, the archaeologist, is hiding somewhere in Witchwood. He's found something big that may be putting his life in danger. I head to Witchwood and solve a puzzle concerning the name of the demon door guarding the archaeologist. Demon doors are all over Albion. They are sentient beings whose origins aren't fully known. Some believe that they are men who were cursed with guarding great treasures or portals to other worlds. Regardless of how they were created, they require a challenge to be completed before entering. This could be something as simple as lighting a lamp in front of them, and could be as difficult as having a high evil alignment. This demon door required that I hit stones corresponding with different letters to spell out his name. Once I did this, the archaeologist greeted me, saying he's been studying the focus sites. He also says that Jack of Blades is interested in the same sites. These sites are structures placed around the world that we see throughout the game. He leaves us his journal for some context and heads out. Now, Fable has a bit of a lore problem. It's not terrible, but there's a ton of backstory to the world that isn't really fully fleshed out within the game. You don't absolutely need to know the lore to find out what happens in the story, but it provides some much-needed context. For that reason, we're going to have a bit of a history lesson and go over the story of Albion before Fable. The earliest history of Albion is mostly legend. The tales tell of three beings that came from the Void: the Knight, the Jack, and the Queen, all using the surname of Blades. They were known as the Court and wanted to take over the world of men, demanding rulership over them. The people of Albion did not go down easily, and the Court scorched the earth, and the sky was filled with smoke. The second time the people of Albion refused to kneel, the Court raised the ocean into the sky and flooded the land. The third and final time they refused, the Court twisted their minds until they killed each other. Finally, the people of Albion bowed, and the reign of the Court began. During this reign, a blacksmith and his wife had a boy named William. He had incredible powers of the mind and could protect his village while performing wonderful feats. These acts were the origin of the powers of will. William was determined to overthrow the court and bring freedom back to Albion. He found his way into the Void and stole the Sword of Aeons. This sword spoke to William and promised to help him defeat the court, but only if he bonded his soul to it. With the sword in tow, William scaled the peak of Ruan and challenged the court. William first destroyed the Knight of Blades, then destroying Jack's body, but his soul escaping into the Void. William battled the Queen last, and this went on for weeks, raising mountains and carving valleys in the land with their ferocious blows. William finally destroyed the Queen, and Albion was free. The people of the land raised William as Archon, their king. After freedom had been set upon the land, the Archon and his children grew bored. They called themselves heroes, but they used their powers, inherited from the Archon, to terrorize the people of Albion. The Archon himself had been infected, body and mind, with an illness. He traveled into the Void to purge the darkness from his body. When it left him, it turned into two antagonistic forces, the darkness and the corruption. The disease did not fully leave the Archon, though, and he wrapped himself in gold mail and a royal blue cloak, disappearing from the land. When the Archon left, Albion descended into madness. The Archon's descendants were vying for power, and each passing one brought fresh tyranny to Albion. No citizens were allowed out after nightfall. Every citizen must appear when an alarm bell sounded, and any who opposed the new Archon's rule were killed along with their families. The newest Archon had constructed the Spire, a massive building that was to be used to focus all of the willpower in the world to grant a single wish. The Spire's completion opened a rift between the Void and Albion, and a beast stepped through, the Crawler. The kingdom's greatest heroes at the time, Blaze, Stone, and Soul, faced the creature, closing the rift but only managing to capture the beast. The next morning the tower was gone, the old kingdom lay in ruins, and all had disappeared, except those who lived beyond the walls. With the old kingdom destroyed, the small settlements that remained formed their own self-sufficient communities. The ruins of the old kingdom turned into wastelands like Greatwood, Witchwood, and the Edgelands. Over time, the history of this place was forgotten. The world became darker day after day, and eventually the Fallow Wars had begun. This was an age of anarchy and blood, which almost brought Albion to extinction. Out of the east, though, came a bandit and mercenary by the name of Nostro. His goal was to bring peace and prosperity to Albion. He met a wise old man by the name of Scythe. Scythe was a wraith-like man, wizened and stern. He carried an ornate sword and wore a tattered blue cloak with ruined gold armor, like that of the first Archon. He took an interest in Nostro because he seemed to possess the power of the first Archon's descendants. Scythe began to tutor Nostro in how to be a just man who was worthy of leading men. Nostro first formed the Heroes Guild, gathering men and women to be trained as true heroes. At the same time, he was being tutored by Scythe in the ways of will. Nostro forced peace upon Albion and created the Witchwood Arena, a venue where people could settle disputes in public. He also commissioned his blacksmiths to form the Tears of Avo, a sword that was meant to replicate the Sword of Aeons wielded by the first Archon himself. Nostro eventually fell under the sway of a courtesan named Magdalena. Her power-hungry ways saw the world change, the arena become nothing more than entertainment, the guild turned into a house of mercenaries, and Nostro himself descending into corruption. Scythe left at the sight of this, not being able to bear to see the fall of Nostro. At the end of his life, Nostro became aware of how corrupted he had become, and even his wife and followers had abandoned him. He was poisoned by an assassin and called on Scythe to sit with him in his final hours. He died and was buried in Lichfield Graveyard. There were also some wars that took place between two churches, the Church of Scorm and the Church of Avo. These two churches were formed by a traitor after finding two opposing fonts of energy. There's speculation that the deities themselves are false gods, but there's evidence that goes both ways. Either way, 200 years after these wars, we are brought up to speed. I know it's a bit of an info dump, and we really didn't truly cover everything, but we will in due time. I think it's important, though, to understand the history of Albion before we delve into the story moving forward. I think Fable lore is pretty cool, but I know not everybody feels that way. If you're browsing the web researching this lore and you don't want anybody to know, then you obviously care about privacy. And if you care about privacy, then you are in the right place. NordVPN is an easy-to-use service that protects your privacy when Googling things like, "What are Balverine's Fable Wiki?" You can connect with one click or enable auto-click for a zero-click connection, which is like the least amount of clicks I can possibly think of. It also has amazing speeds that have been confirmed and backed up by speed tests. I actually genuinely use it personally and could not recommend a better VPN. So if you're interested, go to the link in my description or use code YourFavoriteSon to get a 2-year plan with a bonus gift and a huge discount. Now back to Fable. I went to Knothole Glade to help them with a Balverine problem. They have a special Balverine terrorizing the village, powerful, tall, and covered in white fur. He can only be killed with silver. The wife of the hunter who died fighting him gives me a silver augmentation to be able to take it down. She reveals that her husband is the Balverine, turned into one when hunting Balverines in the forest. Augmentations in Fable are pretty simple, but add a little bit of complexity and customization to the combat. You can apply them to weapons, adding an elemental effect, health regeneration, or even mana to the weapon. With the silver augmentation, I took down the white Balverine, gathered his head, and returned it to the Knothole Glade chieftain. There are a lot of systems in Fable, and one of my personal favorites is the real estate. There are houses for sale in different cities across Albion. These homes can be bought for a price and then either turned into the hero's home or rented out to generate more income. I love games that add little features like this. They add another level of depth, and knowing that I have a steady stream of income was nice. It gives you a way to make money aside from questing. You can also upgrade the decorations of the house to increase the amount of rent collected, or mount trophies on the walls collected from quests to do the same. But wait, why didn't I buy a house for myself? Well, the answer is simple. Saber didn't have a wife. I hadn't thought of this until this point, but at that moment, running around Knothole Glade, I started to notice the women. I found one more pleasant than the rest and started to flirt with her using the various expressions I'd gained, and since I was forcing myself to wear only the most attractive gear, she was already into me. But at a certain point, she got bored, and her attractiveness started going down. This floating heart above her head, shrinking in size as she walked away, hurt more than it should. I wasn't sure what I did wrong. I was an up-and-coming hero, pretty famous at this point. Shouldn't that be enough to attract her? It wasn't, though, and I took this as a sign from the universe that I was meant to be doing bigger things. A wife would just get in the way of heroing. My next goal was to head to the arena. The place was located on the same island as Knothole Glade. Remember our history lesson? This was created by Nostro during the creation of the guild and restoration of Albion. See? It's nice to know these things. The arena has 8 rounds, and the goal is to beat all 8 in one go. If you decide to stop after a round and return to gather more potions or better weapons, you stop accumulating gold and restart. It's not the hardest challenge in the world, but I got too nervous with Saber and stopped around round 6. The first 5 rounds or so are just waves of enemies, hobs, bandits, and undead. The final 3 rounds are boss battles, culminating in an epic battle with a giant scorpion. I actually enjoyed this boss fight. The mechanics were clear, worked well, and it made sense. The scorpion will charge repeatedly and eventually ready up a large attack. You use this moment to attack the scorpion in its weak spot while trying to dodge the charged attack. Halfway through the arena, Whisper joins us in our battle. She assists us through the last half of the waves. When the arena is won, I was told I had to battle Whisper. I did so, and won. She wasn't as powerful as me, she never could be, but that wasn't her fault. After beating her, Jack of Blades, who we know from the lore, is the head of the arena, and he wants blood. He wants me to kill Whisper to take home the gold I've earned. I say no. Whisper didn't deserve this. She's trying her hardest, and she won't die by my hand. Leaving the arena, I'm greeted with Thunder and Lady Grey. Lady Grey is propositioning me to meet her in Bowerstone. She's the mayor of the capital city, and Thunder is upset because he's pining after the mayor. Heading out, one of the guards tells me that I remind him of the old hero Scarlet Robe. I see a statue of the woman, the first female hero to become arena champion. She holds an eagle scepter in her hands, and Jack of Blades approaches. He tells me that she's still alive, failing to save her family. It's clear that she's my mother, and Jack asks to bring him Teresa.
And yet here you are. I knew her son would end up here one day. It's in your blood. And in your sister's too. You should bring her to me. I so long to reunite you both with your mother. Just think of the happiness it would bring her.
This was the true face of his mother, Scarlet Robe, Slayer of Balverines. Once one of the fiercest heroes in all of Albion. Yet her most splendid battle was also to be her last.
The narrator tells us that she almost died fighting Balverines, and she was saved by Braum, my father. Jack was behind the raid at Oakvale, and he captured my mother. Winning the champion seal from the arena has granted me access to Bowerstone North. Teresa is waiting for me at the Grey House outside the Barrow Fields. One of the things I love about Fable that I haven't talked about is its map. As you complete quests and travel to new areas, the map starts to change. Little icons appear showing the distinct nature of each area in Albion. After defeating golems or trolls, they will appear on the map. Orchard Farm sprouts apples after arriving, and the Rose Cottage becomes a field of the red flowers after venturing into its area. It's a wonderful little touch that not only adds character to the world, but also prevents the player from having to remember names, but rather recalling memories to associate with locations. It also gives Fable its own distinct style and a fairy tale-like quality to its world. Teresa already knows who Jack of Blades is, and she tells me that our mother is in Bargate Prison. The archaeologist is the only one that knows how to get in.
You have to get Mother out. She's the only one who knows how to reach the sword. You did read the book I sent, didn't you? The sword is everything, and it could turn the world to nothing. Oh, and Mother has a gift for you too. More power than you can imagine.
She tells us of the Sword of Aeons, that it could turn the tide of the world. This is what Jack is working towards. I start to head for the archaeologist, who is being held on the docks to the north of Albion. On my way, I encounter an imprisoned beggar who says Lady Grey murdered her sister to gain power. He wants me to investigate at the Grey House. I head back and find her spirit still wandering the grounds. In the basement, I find evidence of her murder at the hands of Lady Grey. The mayor herself arrives at that moment, asking me to cover up the murder and become the mayor of the city by marrying her. I refuse and turn her in. In return, I am rewarded the mayorship of Bowerstone. I'm not sure what this grants me outside of a very lavish bed that I can't sleep in, but it's nice to see justice done once more. Heading up the hill, I make my way to the archaeologist. This quest really started to illustrate the problem with Fable's main quest system. A lot of the main quests end up being the same thing. Start in one area, either escort or fight with others to get to another area. Every other time or so, fight a boss at the end, and kill slews of enemies along the way. It started to get a little tired at this point, and the main quests go on for quite a while most of the time. I won't say this is always the case. Some exceptions are the arena, where you're only fighting slews of enemies or bosses in one area, or the White Balverine quest, which actually felt unique and interesting. The side quests were the exception to this rule, though. Most of them, not all, felt like little journeys and pockets of adventure. I think the allure of the main quests were really the choices made along the way, rather than the quests themselves. After all, that's what Fable is about, choice. I rescued the archaeologist from being captured by Jack's minions. He tells me that the way into Bargate Prison is through the Lichfield Graveyard. I really want to talk about Jack's minions as an enemy type for a moment. They are separate in my mind from all the others for one reason: sound design. They have this specific noise that plays when they attack, when they move, when they rush at you. They almost sound mechanical in nature, and whether they are or not doesn't really matter, because this bone-curdling noise that makes you unsettled, it tells you that these beasts are not of this world. They are not natural. Even the Balverines of the world have some place in nature. The Hobbs are some creation of the nymphs, but they are still inevitable. These things are out of place, and it gives you a feeling of off. It's definitely a different feeling than the one you get when fighting bandits, for example. At this point, I made my way to Lichfield Graveyard. There I found a gravekeeper, and the only way I could move forward was with the spirit of Nostro himself, the one who created the Heroes Guild in the first place. His spirit requires that you collect his armor, helmet, shield, and sword to open the demon door leading to the Bargate Prison path. The graveyard happens to be a great place to get experience because there's a couple things I haven't mentioned. First is the combat multiplier. The combat multiplier acts as basically a combo meter. The more you attack and don't get hit, the higher your combat multiplier. This determines how much your experience is multiplied when gained. There also happens to be a scarce amount of potions in the game called Ages Potions. These will give you 1,000 experience in whatever specialty they are made for. For example, an Ages of Will potion will give you 1,000 will experience. The thing is, these potions are affected by the combat multiplier. If you get your multiplier high enough and then use your potion, you'll get a ton of XP for that specialty. Killing the undead is a great way to do this. They die quickly, and if you kill them fast enough, they don't have time to attack. Using an XP potion with a combat multiplier of 30 will net you a ton of XP. But the reason the undead can be the most annoying enemies in the game is when you don't want to fight them. When they spawn, the lesser ones anyways, crawl from the ground. While digging their way up from the earth, they swing their swords out in an arc. There's very little time from when you see the undead crawling from the ground to when they swing their swords, so you almost have no time to dodge this. If you're farming the undead for XP, it's great because they're practically infinite, but if you're trying to move through the area, it's insufferable. Finally arriving at Bargate Prison, I made my way through the dungeons, and was face to face with my mother. She was old and withering, the hero in her long gone. Years of torture had done much to age her, but I brought her with me and we made our escape. This was quickly thwarted by Jack himself. He used his minions to lock both of us up in Bargate. Sitting in prison is a solitary affair, but once a year the guards hold a race. They let the inmates run the ramparts, and whoever wins gets a personal audience with the chief himself. He will read them original poetry for the night, and they are forced to listen. Our goal for this is a little different, though. We're trying to sneak around the office and get the key to the books the chief has on his desk. One of them holds the key to our cell. We can only open one book per try, though, and if we pick the wrong one, we have to redo the race again, costing us another year off of our life. And aging in Fable is permanent, so time passes and we actually get older. Once we find the key, we make our escape, gathering our belongings and rescuing our mother for a final time. On our way out, we find a giant kraken in the sewers of Bargate. Once we kill it, we head outside, and our mother unlocks our final bloodline power. We got the same thing from Teresa before, and I really thought I was missing a mechanic here, but it turns out it's just extra general experience. My mother tells me that I have to find the portal to Hook Coast. That's where the final chapter of this saga lies. Years have passed since I went into prison, and Saber has aged. The guild has lived on, but that also means that Jack has been making moves. I took a side quest to get back into the swing of things, guarding a to-be-executed bandit to his demise. I then ventured to Hook Coast, a desolate, snowy island off the west coast of northern Albion. Here, the key to the focus sites lied, but a barrier blocked the way to this key. Jack is obviously looking for the same one. He wants the focus sites to be able to put all of his power into one source and free the Sword of Aeons. My mother tells me to come back to the guild, as she may have found the way past the barrier, but something isn't right. When I arrive, she's being kidnapped again by Jack's minions, but the secrets she found are still missing. A book reveals the incantation needed to remove the barrier. I head back to Hook Coast and bring down the barrier, but Maze is already there, and Teresa? He has Teresa tied up and under a spell. He realizes he's caught.
I had to tie her up. Jack is controlling her somehow. That's why I'm here. I'm trying to stop him.
He's lying. He's the one working for Jack.
No, she's trying to confuse you.
There is really no time for this, old wizard. Finish the ritual, Maze. I'd like my key now.
The mage, the very man that I looked up to, that I wanted to be since I was a child, the man that saved me, was a traitor. Jack arrives and takes the key, telling Maze to continue. We enter one final duel. One will exit this battle alive. Maze tries to keep his range, but he's old and rusty, and he's no match for the hero that Saber has become.
Maybe you are strong enough to defeat Jack. You haven't got much time. He's using the key to activate the focus sites all over Albion. Then the sword will be his, and it'll be too late. They'll be trying to stop him. None of them can. Oh. You want to know why I did it, don't you? I suppose I'm just an old coward boy. We don't all embrace death easily. For some of us, the only quest, is to escape death. whatever the cost. And it looks like I failed.
He dies admitting his cowardice, telling me that all of life exists to escape death. In that moment, I understand why he did what he did. He was terrified of Jack and became corrupted. It wasn't his fault, even if he was a betrayer. Maze dies and fades from this world. As we arrive back at the Heroes Guild, the Guildmaster tells us that Jack is trying to activate the focus sites across Albion. I hurry through the teleporter and chase Jack across the land. He activates one after another, heroes like Briar Rose and Thunder helping me. It's no match for his speed and power. We're just in time to see him finish the job each time. This last quest is great, heading back through the world that we've already ventured through and seeing these focus sites, important monuments activated, turning the world red and full of flame is a wondrous sight. There's also something to be said about the fact that we've passed these constructs throughout the game. I've seen them in multiple locations while making my way across Albion, but never knew what they were for. I kept saying to myself, this is probably a side quest later. Seeing that come to fruition is genuinely rewarding. Finally, Jack arrives at the Heroes Guild itself. The Guildmaster lies on the ground, wounded, unable to stop him. We head into the Hall of Heroes, where all the murals that we've seen throughout the game exist. Jack has Teresa, Scarlet Robe, and the Sword of Aeons. He stands above us, mask shining in the light and red power emanating from him.
What a touching family reunion. The mother, the son, the daughter, and the sword. There's only one thing missing.
He slashes my mother's throat, and I stand in shock. I've never had this type of hatred in my life. I don't want justice in this moment. I want pain. We fight Jack, which is a pretty easy duel. The first phase has us killing a multitude of his minions, the second sees us fighting Jack as he chases and attacks us, and the third sees Jack hovering above me, shooting bolts of energy and using all of his will to try and destroy me. Teresa survives the battle.
And now comes the choice I spoke of so long ago. Strike me down now with the Sword of Aeons, and you will become as powerful as Jack dreamt of being. Cast it into the vortex, and its darkness will be gone forever.
She tells me that the Sword of Aeons is free for me to take, but to use its power, I have to kill her with it, one of my bloodline. The only other thing to do is to cast the sword into the vortex and destroy it forever. It's not the choice that's hard. I've never wanted power, just to protect the ones I love. Even though my mother is gone, as long as I can protect Teresa, my goal will be complete. I destroy the sword. Saber was famous, a name known amongst the people. Teresa retreated to distant lands, needing time to heal. I understood. An extra set of quests comes included with Fable The Lost Chapters and Fable Anniversary. This area is called the Northern Wastes. It introduces the character Scythe officially into the game. Scythe contacts the guild, telling them that there's a danger approaching in the Northern Wastes, an island even farther north than Hook Coast. Scythe is a very decrepit-looking figure, dressed in blue robes and gold armor. There's a very common theory that Scythe is actually William Black, the first Archon. He's seen wearing the exact same clothes that William was described as wearing when he disappeared. There's evidence to support this as well, saying that the Archons were immortal, and he can't be killed throughout the story. The Oracle even says that the first Archon still casts his shadow in this world. Taking Scythe's warning that Jack may be being resurrected in the Wastes, the hero needs the Fireheart to get there. The Fireheart is hidden behind a demon door, which we can get through because we have Jack's mask. It's also being protected by 5 sorcerers trapped in ice. We have to solve this puzzle to get the flame, one for each sorcerer. Turning the tiles to suns will free the sorcerers, and turning them to moons will kill them. This was an odd choice in the game because at this point you'd be killing them just to kill them. It'd be completely for the sake of evil because either way you still get the Fireheart. After we gather the flame and save the sorcerers, we head for Hook Coast, secure the ship that will take us to the Northern Wastes. Briar Rose is there and she tells me to place the flame in the top of the lighthouse. Some summoners arrive, a new powerful enemy type, and they're trying to destroy the flame. We dispense with them and our ship arrives, taking us to the Lost Bay. The trip was long, and Saber has developed quite the beard on the journey. The first thing we're confronted with is a boss, a frost troll. These things are incredibly annoying. They have this ice column attack, which shoots out crystals of ice in a line at you. If you're caught in it, you're going flying because the ice just keeps pushing you back until it's stopped. They're not incredibly hard to beat, just a hassle to actually get close enough to do damage. At the center of the island, we find a large construct. Briar Rose is doing some research to figure out how to get it working. This is the key to stopping Jack's resurrection. Scythe is in Snowspire Village. This is the small frozen town where he's been doing his research. He tells us that we need to find the 4 glyphs to get the Oracle working, a large construct that was created during the reign of the Third Archon. These runes are in the necropolis, and I went to dig them up with my trusty spade. After defeating another frost troll and some packs of enemies, we get the runes and activate the Oracle. The Oracle is actually an amazing addition of lore to the game. You can stand on this platform and perform gestures to ask it about random parts of Albion's past. It will tell you things about people, different creatures, or the history of Albion itself.
Some interesting things about demon doors. The life of a rock endowed with consciousness is never easy.
Of course, Fable's weird humor comes in here, and the glyphs are a reference to YMCA. Briar figures out that we need to collect 3 souls to get the construct working, and open the Bronze Gate, where Jack is being resurrected. The first soul we need to collect is a champion of the arena. We go to Thunder to ask him for his help, being a previous champion himself. He tells us to head to the arena and see what we can find. There, summoners are already attacking the place, looking for the soul themselves. We defeat waves and waves, Jack taunting us from the mask the entire time. While we do these quests, Jack is always telling us just to take the easy way and kill Thunder or one of the other heroes that meet that criteria.
Why go all the way to the arena?
But we don't listen. After defeating this version of the arena, we gain the arena soul and trap it in Jack's mask. We take it back to Briar and she inserts it into the machine. The next soul is one of a heroine. Briar suggests Scarlet Robe's soul, as she was always one for making sacrifices. We head to the Oakvale Cemetery, and Scarlet Robe's spirit is there. We have a conversation with her and defeat some screamers, eventually accepting her soul into the mask. The final soul we need to retrieve is the oldest soul. Briar suggests Nostro's soul, but Jack suggests the Guildmaster's. The Guildmaster is out of the question, so we head to Litchfield Graveyard. We have to fight a resurrected form of Nostro, destroying undead to make him vulnerable. With the final soul in tow, we head back to the Archon's shrine and the Bronze Gate opens. This is the final battle of the game. Jack of Blades has taken on the form of a giant dragon and taunts us while fighting him. He says that this place, full of fire and smoke, looks like Oakvale.
All these flames, it's just like the day Oakvale burned.
We kill him and put his soul into the mask, but it taunts us, telling us to put it on. It would be the ultimate power, the full ability to protect everyone, but I don't accept it. I destroy the mask and leave the place for good. Jack has been destroyed, the world is at peace, and Saber is ready to go home. I thought this DLC was fun. The biggest thing it did was add content and lore to the game. I feel like this one area did more to expand on the history of Albion than the entirety of the base game. It also gives the player the option to make some really interesting choices, like killing Thunder, Briar Rose, and the Guildmaster if they want. Fighting Jack one more time wasn't something I thought was properly handled. I feel like they could have set up another villain for the next game, but the next game takes place far in the future. Even in that same vein, they could have set up what happens to the hero of Oakvale, as that question is never fully answered in-game. Before we get into the final words of the game, I'd like to briefly go over my evil playthrough, because I think contextualizing this separation is integral to the entire point of the game, and will help me illustrate one of its greatest strengths. We're also trying to be comprehensive here, so how could I not cover this? We've heard Saber's story, now let's look at Hood. The story starts in the same place, with the same boy. I needed money to buy my sister a present, and my father wanted me to complete some good deeds. The big change in this playthrough was when I found the man cheating on his wife. He said that he'd give me money if I didn't tell anyone about this. I took it. It wasn't just the fact that he gave me money, though, it was the words that he said.
Look after yourself. Forget everyone else.
Look after yourself, and forget everyone else. He was right. It was just me in this world, in the end. I had to pay attention to that. Plus, he gave me a gold coin. I helped a man protect his crates, but I smashed his barrels when he was gone. It felt good. A kid was being bullied, and I helped the bully because it felt good to have someone strong on my side. The guard chastised me for hitting the kid. He told me to think about whether my actions were worth it, because bad deeds weren't worth it. But I had a gold coin that said otherwise. My dad gave me 3 gold coins for doing work around the town, and I bought my sister chocolates. Still 1 gold coin left over. Then the town was raided. In this moment, I felt powerless, and seeing my father's body before me, unmoving, eyes wide open, I knew I needed to be stronger. I needed to have so much power that this would never happen again. Then I saw Maze. He represented that power in my eyes. As he took me to the Heroes Guild, I realized I would surpass him. I would become the most powerful hero ever. People would fear me so much that they would never even think of hurting me or anyone around me. But when the guildmaster left me alone, I still cried. I was still sad. This is the crux of Fable's choice system. Yes, you will make choices that will have different consequences and effects. The story will be changed slightly. Characters will die that didn't, and people will survive that perished during the good playthrough. But it's ultimately not these choices that make the biggest difference. It's the lens through which you view the same story. I began training with Whisper and the Guildmaster. I was better than her, much better than her. Her teasing and taunting were relentless, and it was baffling that she could see someone like me with such potential and so much future power and treat me like a child. The Guildmaster was kind, and he gave me the tutelage I needed to get stronger. We graduated and got our guild seals. I took my first quest and saved the villagers from the Wasp Queen. These people were cheering for me, but did they know I didn't do this for them? I didn't save them because I cared. I saved them because I knew it would get me further toward my goal, slaughtering the men who took my sister and mother. I took the job to attack Orchard Farm. I figured I could help the bandits and get more money, maybe getting stronger in the process. More money meant better weapons, which meant I could smite my enemies easier. I needed it. I didn't feel good taking from these farmers, but it was necessary. They realized that, right? I was a hero. I was important. They made food. I fought Whisper, and she was no match. The years had done nothing to advance her training. I guided some traders through Darkwood, and only one of them made it. A third tried to join us, but he was clearly infected by a Balverine. I killed him before he could turn. Mercy. I reached Oakvale, my home. The memories came flooding back, things I didn't want to think about, and the rage only got louder. People were scared of me now, running in fear or booing me in shops. They were jealous. Their words meant nothing to me. A spirit wanted me to give his treasure to his wife, but I wanted the treasure. The 500 gold could buy me armor, but I needed the spirit to leave, so I killed his wife and took the money. She wasn't going to marry again. Necessary. Maze told me he had information about Teresa, that she could still be alive. I journeyed to Twinblade's camp to see if I could find the seeress that knew more about her. I hired some assassins to get me in. What was money worth if it wasn't spent? When I defeated Twinblade, Teresa came out. She was the blind seeress. She gave me more power, and I used it to kill Twinblade and his entire guard. They were bandits, killing for money. I didn't kill for money. I killed for power. None of these lowly folk could ever rise to the status that I was meant to. They were weak. Some bandits offered me a job to slaughter the town of Barrow Fields. Traders and guards all. We'd take their money. I couldn't pass it up. Another consequence of the path I'd chosen. I went to Knothole Glade at Maze's request. I found the archaeologist and killed the White Balverine. I went to the arena and completed it in one go. Whisper fought me at the end and lost. I needed to kill her for the money? Wait, but it was a lot of money. Money that could buy potions, swords, armor, bows. Things like that would make people fear me. More power. The power would make it so that Oakvale didn't happen again. I could make sure it never happened again. Plus, Whisper had always undermined me. I could tell. I could see it in her eyes that she thought she was more powerful than I. This surely wouldn't be the last hero I'd have to kill on my path. I had to get used to it. She meant nothing to me when I struck her down. Thunder chastised me for killing his sister, but he knew what she was getting into. This was the business. I met Jack of Blades. I wasn't strong enough to take him down yet. I needed to save my mother first. Lady Grey told me to visit her sometime, but I didn't have time for women. She would just get in the way of my duty, but would she? This woman seemed like a smart one, vying for power and moving herself up the ladder. Maybe that was perfect. She was cold and cruel, but no sweet woman could ever be with me. Look at me. I've become a monster. I went to see Lady Grey. I courted her, brought her gifts, bought a home. Finally, she wanted me to fight Thunder, her other suitor, to prove myself. We battled at the Headsman's Hill. He wanted more than just her love. He wanted to avenge his sister. He wasn't strong enough, just like her, just like Whisper. He couldn't protect her, and he couldn't protect himself. He was weak. How was he supposed to protect Lady Grey? We married the next day. I didn't love her. Truly, I felt nothing for her, but she brought me up. She gave me more money to buy better equipment, and she brought me more influence. I saved the archaeologist at the docks and headed to Litchfield Graveyard to find the path to the prison. I killed the gravekeeper when I got inside and took his key. I didn't have time to deal with old bumbling buffoons. I rescued my mother from the prison, but Jack caught us. I was trapped again. How did I let this happen? How did I fail? I'm meant to be the most powerful person in the world, and this man keeps one step ahead of me always. I made my escape, took my mother, and headed back to the guild. Hook Coast. That's where I'd stop him. Again, he captured my mother. At this point, I knew I'd make it to him before he could do anything. I was too strong, and he was a fool who had manipulated his way to the top. I'd take it by force. During this playthrough, I tried to focus on magic, going for a kind of evil spellcaster thing. This is when I realized the limitations of the will system. The best spells in the game are the ones that augment swords or bows. Spells like Berserker make your sword swings incredibly powerful for a short moment, and multi-hit lets you fire multiple arrows at once. I wanted to use only will during my playthrough, but it just seemed like fighting an uphill battle. This is something that future games would work on a bit, but Hood ended up becoming an evil archer because the power of bows in this game can be bested by none. Maze betrayed me. I didn't care. It didn't even hurt. I knew I would be stronger than him. He was a coward, a fool. I would have respected him if he was trying to take this power for himself, but he wasn't. He died admitting his cowardice. I chased Jack through Albion and made it to the guild hall. The guildmaster was hurt. This felt odd. Why did I care about this old man? Was it because he reminded me of my father? Was it because he was my father, the one that truly raised me? I had to get to Jack. Before I could, he sliced my mother's neck, and there was no pain, no fear, no hurt, just anger, rage. I had to kill him. This was my last test. I struck him down quickly. I always knew I was more powerful, and now I proved that. The most powerful man in the world, part of the court. I was stronger than William himself, the first Archon. No one could defy me. Teresa was speaking. She said I would have to kill her to receive the sword. I didn't want to. But she was neutral. She wasn't scared of death. Neither of us were. We were meant to die as children. The fact that she made it this far was a miracle, and she knew that it was necessary. I'd gone too far to turn back now. I killed her and took the sword. At this point, I was alone. I hadn't seen Lady Grey in months, and Scythe communicated with us. I took the flame heart by force. I felt nothing when I killed these old men. I didn't do it for money, power, or even to feel. I just did it because that's what I do. People know the name Hood. They fear the name Hood. This is what I'm meant for. I took the fire heart and headed on the ship of the drowned. Briar needed me to collect 3 souls. The first was an arena soul. I was powerful now. I could kill Thunder to save some time. I also let him go last time, and he needed to pay for that. I should have killed him already. He went down easy, and I took his soul into the mask. Killing these 2 just meant there was less competition. It wasn't a challenge, but I didn't need them rising up against me later. I took her soul as well. The last was Who? Not him. I went to the Heroes Guild. He tried to fight, and even tried to convince me in the end.
You have been given too much power, and it has corrupted you. But it isn't too late to turn back. Stop this now, and there is still hope for you, for all of us. Please, let me teleport you to the graveyard. Take Nostro's soul instead.
It was too late. I was beyond convincing. There were no morals in this. These people weren't anything anymore, just bodies with voices, mouths flapping, and I killed the man who raised me. I took the mask and fought Jack one last time. He was weaker than I expected. When the mask sat before me in my hand, I knew this is what everything was building to. This moment. Nothing else mattered. This was the final power. This was my ascendancy to godhood. I would do what no one else could. I would rule. Now that you've seen both sides, both stories, you see the difference. This is what this game is about. I genuinely didn't think the Evil playthrough would be that different. I figured it would have a bad ending and you'd kill some people along the way, which you do. Killing the Guildmaster was actually particularly hard for me, if I'm being honest. But the point here isn't the changes made to the story, it's how you view the story, once you're in the shoes of a character with different motivations. It's how you view the same characters now that you want different things, and how just one goal, one action as a child can create these two different stories. This is the genius of the introductory quests as well. They set the tone and the atmosphere for everything that comes after. They're a micro version of the grand choices that you'll make later. It's not only introducing you to characters and mechanics, but how you make choices moving forward. Sure, you can be both good and evil and make contradictory decisions each time, but it's just not as fun.
Fable, as a whole, did a lot for video games. It introduced the idea that a game can put the player and its choices at the forefront. Stories can be told dynamically, and I think the modern gaming landscape has a lot more of that, thanks to Fable. I also want to reiterate here that I'm not saying Fable did this first, but I think its effect on the general gaming landscape and RPGs as a whole is one that hasn't really been talked about very much. It also introduced its own world of interesting characters and a fun progression system with combat that kept me engaged. There were some things that bugged me, mostly resulting from technical issues. The UI could be very cumbersome and often bugged out when just trying to swap out gear. Combat was interesting, but felt like it hadn't been fully realized yet. And a lot of characters' lines had been delivered in disjointed and strange ways. Outside of that, Fable is an incredibly interesting and ambitious concept. I think its lack of large characterization and basic narrative work to move its goals forward to provide you with a blank slate. Fable isn't supposed to tell you an interesting story. It wants you to tell that story yourself. It puts you in someone else's shoes and asks you to take the wheel narratively. This can create some amazing situations or some terrible ones, but that is up to you. This level of agency is what pulled me into Fable in the first place, and it excels on that point above the rest. I genuinely enjoyed my time with Fable. Obviously, my favorite part was making choices and playing both sides of the same story. Crafting my own narrative was fun, and seeing my effect on the world and the character were interesting. The things that bothered me with Fable were mostly fixed in future entries of the series, but those come with problems of their own. If you get the chance, I'd highly recommend playing Fable at some point if you already haven't. It's worth the time you put into it, and Fable Anniversary makes it mostly more accessible than ever. Fable had its effect on gaming. It was maybe not the cause, but the start of a huge trend in the coming years. But it also continued its own story, its own world that it had developed. This would be just the first entry in a series that would continue for over a decade, and still has another entry in the works. The first game was a success upon release, selling over 1 million copies in less than a year. Critics praised the game for its depth and open-ended nature. Molyneux was criticized for promising features that never appeared in the game. The studio wanted to capitalize on the success and interest from the fanbase, though, and greenlit a sequel. A sequel which we'll be talking about in the next video. Bye, Dad. Thank you so much for watching, Dad. I really appreciate it, as always, and lately the attention to my channel just hasn't stopped. It's so wonderful to see all the supportive comments and messages. Like I said, I'm trying out this new format with the next chapter being Fable 2. I think this format will help the channel moving forward, and it will help you guys because you'll get more frequent uploads. I still want to make the same product in the end, but I want to be able to put out finished content more frequently. With all that said, if you want to support me, you can do so on the Patreon, which is down in the description. I put out monthly update videos and some exclusive content. That being said, I want to shout out my current patrons who support me. At the official Dad tier, we have Zachary Howard, the Brunette Girl from ABBA, Strupp, Sloppy Joe 11, Shadow Cosmos, Prototype Snipe, Michael Choiri, Isaac Dandridge, Frank Horrigan, Donut Stalker, Christopher Garcia, Calm That Noise Network. At the $10 Good Dad tier, we have Shin Jammer, Lyris Dirgeheart, and Classy Swish. And at the top $20 Best Dad tier, we have Isaac Hampton. Thank you so much for all your support. I really appreciate it. You can also follow me on Twitch and Twitter, which are in the description. I've been streaming a lot more lately, just watching videos, playing games, hanging out with chat. It's just been a general good time, so stop in every once in a while and spend some quality time with your son. Thanks again for watching. Bye, Dad.